Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 118, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Ravi Abbott.
And at the time we're recording this show, it's actually a different day that we're in today, and it just so happens to be the first day of summer by looking out the window right now.
We're trapped in the studio, but it's been really horrible, hasn't it, this winter? It's kind of been massively foggy, like...
Snow, sleet.
You were driving me home the other day, and it was like, we couldn't see in front of the car.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
But today, I got texts off my mates, beer garden weather, we're going out. And I'm like, got to record the podcast. They're like, what? But I mean, we normally do record this show in the week on the evenings, but there has to be a really good reason for us to come in here on a gorgeous sunny Saturday afternoon, but it is well worth it. Now, today, we have got an absolute legend on the Retro Hour podcast. Our special guest is going to be Chuck Sommerville.
Yes, now, Chuck Sommerville is absolutely amazing. He started doing Apple II games, and, John Romero was one of the guys that actually completed his game. And then he went on to Epyx with the C64, and, Epyx, they did the Lynx originally before it came out to Atari. And then he went to EAA, and then 3DO, and then, maybe... played around with the M2 as well. So.
Was that the ill-fated follow-up to the 3DO that never came out?
Yeah.
I did hear a story there, because I remember there was that really amazing demo where it showed, have you ever seen it on YouTube of the 3DO M2? And it has kind of like morphing out the ground and texture mapping. It looks amazing. But I heard that apparently that technology was used in like one or two arcade machines, and it ended up in a coffee machine. That was like its eventual fate.
We'll have to find out. And, he's bought you the great Chips Challenge and Chips Challenge 2 and Chuck's Challenge as well, which is the new version.
And a game that every kid at my school had, California Games. That was like the biggest thing at my school back in the day. Summer Games 2 as well. We could go on, but I think we're just going to talk to Chuck himself and get those stories. He's going to be coming up. Our special guest, Chuck Sommerville, will be on the Retro Hour podcast in around 15 minutes from now. Now, obviously, the weather is looking gorgeous now here in the UK, and apparently it's going to get even nicer this week. Bit of a heat wave on the way. People are going to be out, maybe days out to the seaside, in the garden, doors open, music playing out. You might want some kind of feel-good music while you're doing all that.
Yeah, well, I've been running this 24-hour YouTube radio. It's currently not running at the moment because I'll tell you what, I was streaming it off my PC at home.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that was I couldn't do anything without having constant video game music blasting out of my PC. So it's like, I want to do a bit of video editing. They might hear that over it and stuff. So I decided to do a dedicated server for it. So I'm building a PC at the moment, and it's going to be in my house, just chugging away, playing 24-hour cool chip music, like one of these stations on YouTube where you just tune in and have some background music going on.
It's live all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, and it's all curated by me, so I've picked individual mods, and I've done this over 5 years, actually. Yeah. So...
long time in the planning.
All killer, no filler, that's what I say.
Well, I had it on the other day when I was working at home, and it's actually really good to listen to while you're working.
Yeah, because I categorise them all into different styles as well. So it will go from, like, really hard dance to, like, a castle soundtrack or something. It's a total mix.
So if you want to check that out, we'll put a link in this week's show notes. Should be back up by the time the show comes out.
Yeah. So basically, if you go onto my YouTube channel and you're Retro Ravi, just search for that, and it will appear as live. The live video on the time will be 24/7 Amiga music.
I keep seeing it whenever I open YouTube on my phone. You're at the top.
Yeah, so, baby.
What, you getting about 100 new subs a day at the minute?
Yeah, it works well.
Pretty good idea. So if you want a bit of background music while you're working or enjoying the sunshine, we'll put a link in the show notes at theretrohour.com.
We should do that one day. We should do a live stream, I think. A lot of people have been asking for it, so maybe we should say on the show, we're going to do a live stream at this point and do a call-in or something.
What does that mean, no editing?
Yeah. Oh, live done.
Everyone to see all our flaws. Yeah. Of course we don't edit the show. All adds live to tape anyway. Now, speaking of our website, theretrohour.com, that is where you can also help us out with the running of the Retro Hour podcast. Now, with summer coming, we've got loads of events that we're going to be doing. The calendar on our website is kept up to date as well. And if you want to help us out with stuff we're doing right now, server costs, website audio hosting, new website that we're making, getting to events, all of that coming up to help promote the podcast and get more people through the door. And the only way that we can do this really is with your help. So we do have a little section on our website where you can make a donation. Now, it can be any amount, big or small, and obviously it is completely optional. We're never going to charge for the show. We'll always put it out for free, but if you want to help us in the running of it, that is really appreciated.
And that's a good point, actually, because, some people are on Patreon and stuff, but we're never going to introduce a paywall.
No.
That is, all this content's going to be for everybody.
Well, that's the thing, we've done the show now for over 2 years. The reason we do it is because we enjoy doing it and we love it.
Yeah.
But, we do have to pay for it ourselves otherwise, which, we don't mind doing it, but it's fine. But if we get a bit of help, paying for the show, that's always really appreciated, guys. So if you want to help out, all you've got to do is nip onto the website, theretrohour.com. We do have a PayPal button that you can click there, fill in your email address. It takes 10 seconds. There's cryptocurrency if you're into that as well, which is on the up at the moment, I see.
Yep.
And for doing that, you'll actually find your place in the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Now, this week, we want to say thank you so much to Hubert Stanzik,
Gary Heather,
Craig Marshall,
Joachim Mild,
who all made donations into the running of the Retro Hour podcast. You can find your name in a future episode of the podcast by making a donation right now at theretrohour.com. Now, before we get into this week's special guest, Chuck Sommerville, a few news stories that we need to talk about. Now, the big thing last year was obviously all of Nintendo's mini consoles.
Well, everybody's, isn't it? C64 Mini as well at the moment, and Amiga Mini people are talking about.
Is that happening?
Yeah, it's happening. Calanto have a deal with the guys who did the C64 Mini, so that's actually happening.
Well, there is a miniature craze going on right now. And the one that everybody has been asking for, ever since, the first SNES Mini and NES Mini were introduced about a year ago, was, come on, Sega, when are you going to give us a Mega Drive Mini?
Yeah, the Mega Drive Mini that was licensed, was released by AtGames, was absolutely rubbish. So hopefully this delivers. And it does look very mini. They've done an announcement in Japan, haven't they?
So the story here on Polygon says, to commemorate the Mega Drive's upcoming 30th anniversary, which is this year, can you believe it? They're going to be doing a miniature classic edition of the legendary 16-bit console, the Genesis in America, Mega Drive rest of the world. They're going to be calling it the Mega Drive Mini. That is going to be released a bit later on this year. And they announced it at a fan event a bit earlier on this week. Now, there is a picture of them on stage holding what appears to be a miniaturized Mega Drive. Now, obviously Sega did officially license the AtGames console.
Yeah.
The thing is, from what I've seen of this, apparently that is the AtGames console that Sega are going to be putting out.
Well, maybe they're just going to steal that market, They're thinking, why are these guys making money?
No, apparently that is the AtGames.
What, that he's holding?
Yeah, that is what it's going to be. So there is...
Well, I hope they improve it, for Christ's sake.
Well, there is a link here. The source of the article, it's a Japanese website, but you run it through a translator, and apparently it appears that Sega just wants to distribute the AtGames Mega Drive in Japan.
Okay, yeah.
But looking at it, it looks a bit different, because it hasn't got a cartridge slot on it, and apparently the volume slider works.
Okay.
So whether they've kind of changed the shell of it a little bit...
Or updated the firmware or something on there.
Well, that's the thing. It's an FPGA-based system, I believe. What I'm hoping is, if Sega are going to take it on and give it, official Sega status, they're at least going to work on it a bit more and bring it up to, do a bit of quality control on it.
Yeah, and to be honest, this is pretty easy for them, isn't it? They just put this out and they're guaranteed to make money. It's no-brainer.
I remember using a Sega Mega Drive emulator in, 1995.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do,
No.
surely, to get one working well. And this AtGames thing, have you actually played with one?
Yeah, I played with one, but I played with the sound off.
Right, okay.
And it was okay.
Well, the UI is awful. It's really tricky to navigate around that. But I think if they get the audio improved, do a bit of work on the user interface, there's some big emissions on there as well, like Streets of Rage games, which you need to have in there.
Well, what's going to happen now, though, are AtGames going to get annoyed and make another unofficial one that does that? Or, I don't know, how's their relationship going to change? That's going to be interesting.
Well, I'd imagine if Sega are simply distributing their product, they must have a very close partnership. But, looking at this, it doesn't look like the one that we've got on sale over here at the moment. So it looks like either they've worked with AtGames to modify it a little bit, so I'm hoping there will be better quality control there that Sega have got involved with. The one thing I do like about them, though, have you used a control pad, wireless ones?
No.
They're really good.
Yeah.
It's like the 6-button Pro controller, it's actually really good. So there is some good points to the AtGames one, but I'm hoping if Sega are involved with it, bit of quality control before it goes out the door.
Yeah.
They must pay attention to what the community is saying about it. You know what's good, though? Sega are back in the hardware market.
Yeah, eventually, after it's been probably the easiest possible thing to ever do, like that, and they still mess it up a little bit. So.
Well, the last thing they made was Dreamcast, so if Sega are going to be manufacturing it, it is kind of Sega coming back to the hardware market.
It is good, yeah. I'm just being cynical.
Cynical Ravi, come on. Well, speaking of Sega, and this is something that I'm very excited about, because, the Switch is my most played console at the moment. The Sega Ages series is coming to the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, now this is really cool, because I've kind of had these little game compilation packs of Sega older stuff like the Mega Drive collection and stuff on Steam. But it's going to be nice coming to the Switch to have all these games. 15 releases are planned, you know.
Well, that's cool because it actually means they've beaten Nintendo to the Switch with the Virtual Console.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah.
But they are going to be doing, I mean, they announced this at the Sega Fez show, or FES. They're going to be bringing Sonic the Hedgehog, the original, Phantasy Star, Thunder Force 4, as part of the Sega Ages line they're going to be bringing out to the Nintendo Switch. And like you did mention there, I mean, it's around the same time that they're bringing out the compilation that they're doing as well for the PC, PS4 and the Xbox One, which is the Sega Mega Drive collection. That I think from the looks of that, it looks pretty similar to the one that came out on the 360 and the PS3 a couple of years ago.
Definitely, and I think there's going to be stuff like, you know, Final Fantasy on this, and like Golden Axe and Streets of Rage. You know, they'll eventually put out kind of all the classic titles, I hope.
Well, the thing about the compilation that they're bringing out on the Xbox and PS4, I know a couple of our mates are involved in that, aren't they? Like Kim Justice and
I think
Dan
so,
Davidson.
yeah, because there's this Sega Forever, and they were basically, oh, look, people care about us now, so let's start sending out stuff and start contacting YouTubers and stuff, which is quite nice compared to what Nintendo do, which is shut them all down.
Well, I saw Daniel, I think it was on his Instagram. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. Slopes Game Room. He did a video where he's in Sega's HQ. He was
his eyes were so big and wide, yeah.
But that is cool that Sega are kind of, getting the community involved as well. And obviously, they're kind of getting to that stage now where, I mean, to be fair, Sega haven't got many new franchises that are setting the world alight. So it makes sense to look back and celebrate the kind of, their glory days, as it were, I suppose. And the fact that I was a little bit...
Sonic Mania and stuff like that, they're on that road, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was a bit gutted that the Mega Drive collection wasn't coming out on the Switch. So having at least this series coming out on the Switch and having a few other games on there is at least something. And, I'm pleased they're doing that. Because I think with the Switch, I find it's selling really well at the moment. But a lot of developers are still kind of a bit cautious of it. And I think when they put a game or two out on them, they see how well it does. They're like, oh, okay, well, we'll go all in now.
Yeah, I was on it the other day and I was going through the store and I was like, all of these games, like 50 quid for Tetris.
Yeah.
I was like, God.
That's the thing. You could understand when it first came out, but it's been out over a year now.
It's like 70 quid for a golf game or something like that. It's really, really bad.
What is annoying is, though, you often get stuff on there that might be like 9 quid on the PS4 and it's like 25 quid on the Switch.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Sega, please. I don't want to pay 50 quid for Sonic the Hedgehog.
That's it.
Now, we got the most amazing letter the other day from a guy called Ryan. Now, he's a listener in California. Let me read out the letter that you sent in. It goes, "Hey, Dan and Ravi, I'm a big fan of your podcast. Since I started listening to you guys, I've started building up a great Commodore 64 collection. I've even learned assembly coding, tried to make a bit of fun stuff from the system, and I've learned a great deal of fun games from you guys and listen every week to the podcast," which in itself is amazing, isn't it? Mm. Now, a couple of weeks ago when Joe was on, we talked a bit about Dance Dance Revolution, didn't we?
Oh, God. Dance Dance, I just have this one image of my dad at Sega World.
Yeah.
Big trench coat. He had a side bag as well. Just going mental on Dance Dance Revolution. It was like...
whenever I've gone on Dance Dance Revolution, you don't realise my knees ache for days after I've been on that thing.
No, but that was such a good, interactive, different form of gaming, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was like... Also, it had that whole element of people standing around and watching.
Yeah.
And performance, performance in real life rather than on the game,
It was kind of, it was like street dancing, wasn't it? Watching it and stuff. Well, we keep talking about all these anniversaries that things are celebrating. Dance Dance Revolution is 20 years old, which is nuts. And the freestyle scene apparently faded away in California. But what they've actually done is, and apparently we've inspired him to do this, which I think is amazing, they're actually going to be doing a 20th anniversary of Dance Dance Revolution with a freestyle takeover event that's going to be held in California. Apparently they did one, it got a really big crowd, but this year they're going to put like a bit of a modern kind of spin on it with like Twitch and YouTube and social media.
So if you want to see your cool dancer, you'd have to go down to the arcade, see when they're in there and wait for the crowd and get a good position. But now you've got the internet. Mm-hmm. So people can actually submit on a cyber cipher. So they do like little freestyle competitions. You can record your freestyle, then submit it and get judged on it and kind of get full results and maybe win some stuff. It's
So
quite
you can do it
cool.
from anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
Which is pretty
anywhere in the
amazing.
world, yeah.
Well,
During this freestyle contest.
Well, he says at the end of his letter, he goes, listening to the Retro Hour podcast was a very big inspiration for me to get involved in revitalising the old community full of fantastic gaming memories. I want to thank you guys for what you're doing and keeping this stuff alive, which, I think is wonderful. So
We need to do a Dance Dance Revolution dance off it. Enter it, don't we, Dan?
I bet you've got some moves on there.
Oh,
haven't you?
wicked, yeah. I'll start voguing.
I think that Britney Spears Toxic or something. I bet you've done that before. So if you want to find out more, their website is freestyletakeover.wordpress.com. So thank you, Ryan. That is amazing when we inspire stuff like that. I think that's really cool.
I was blown away by that letter. Thank you.
We're at Play in the summer. We've got to get a couple of videos recorded.
Oh, God.
Maybe after a drink
Yeah.
or 10. Now, speaking of events that are coming up as well, we got another actual letter here off Kevin George. He's one of our listeners and wanted to let us know about a really cool event that's apparently going to be displaying every console ever released in the UK.
Yeah, it's a Pontypool museum and it's called Generation Games.
Okay.
So it's basically every one that was on sale, which is really cool just to see them all in the kind of place like, choices. And it comes from like 1972 to present.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a full spanning. You've probably got the old Biotone Pong machines.
Oh,
you know,
like the grandstand machines
yeah.
and stuff like that. If they've got every console, it must mean like even the weird stuff like the Amstrad GX 4000 and the Commodore 64 GS, that was a game system. You know what, actually, I've been thinking about that recently because that Commodore 64 Mini's out now and it hasn't got a keyboard. A lot of people are putting games on, they're like, I can't press a button. I'm like, well, you think we'd have realised that after the Commodore 64 console like 30 years ago. So if you want to go along and see, there's going to be stuff there, I imagine. It'll be like, oh my God, seeing one of those in person for the first time.
Yeah, and it's the 31st of March till the 28th of October at the Pontypool Museum.
It's running all throughout the summer as
Yeah.
well. So if you want to find out more and get your tickets booked for that, we'll put it in the show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, obviously in our community, if you want to get into collecting games, there's not that many new stuff out there. It's generally going to shops and getting kind of second-hand goods or used goods, A lot of shops actually specialise in selling them now, don't they?
Yeah.
One thing you don't expect to find, though, when you're buying an old, maybe a NES cartridge, is a big stash of drugs inside.
No, definitely not. And these stories are crazy. I've started to see quite a few of them, but this one's very unique, which is a retro gamer collector, Justin Turner. He kind of uploaded a video where he'd got these NES carts.
Yeah.
And he was like, these weigh a little bit more.
They're too heavy.
Yeah, they're too heavy, so let's take them apart and see what it is. So he did it on YouTube, and as he takes them apart, he finds these packages of, I think it's £5,000 street value of drugs, and then he opens another one, and he finds like thousands of pounds worth of cash hidden inside the NES cart.
There is $5,000
In
bills,
yeah.
rolled up inside. It's a game of golf on the NES, and which is weird. Apparently, the money dates back to 1985. So, do you think like some gangster or drug baron or something like that you sit in there? Maybe you got wasted and
Forgot about it and traded them in.
that's insane, isn't it?
Yeah, it's insane. So he actually finds it, and then at the end he rings the police.
Yeah.
And then they're coming to his house and he films it all.
But yeah, I mean, you look at inside them here, and what is weird is it's actually a copy of golf and roller games, but they reckon, opening the cartridge, they've actually deliberately modified them to fit these inside.
Yeah,
so
they've smashed the PCBs down, but the bottom is still actually visible.
Yeah, so the game doesn't work, I imagine.
No, it's a proper smuggling operation, that one is. But didn't we talk about that story where this kid found some meth in his game the other day?
It's really weird, yeah. I think there's 2 incidents last year. I remember hearing about a GameStop in America. And, they'd gone through the manuals. One story was it was a kid, and he had Grand Theft Auto 5, which an 11-year-old probably shouldn't be playing anyway.
No.
Let's get that out there. But, when the game loads, it takes a long time to load that game, doesn't it? And like we all used to back in the day, flip through the manual while the game's loading up. And he found this little bag in there, and apparently it was, meth, amphetamine. And he went to his mum and said, "What's this?" But apparently that had happened the year before as well.
Jesus.
So I don't know what's going on. All these gangsters maybe using their kids' bedroom video game collection to stash stuff
let's
in.
hope they're not using like a rare copy of Castlevania.
I'm just thinking the police or the FBI or something are going to get wind of this and suddenly
Start
gamers
collecting games.
going to be coming in raiding gamers' rooms to find stuff. So how weird though. So if you want to watch that video, definitely one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard in retro
One
gaming.
not to be missed.
Absolutely, we'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Now, this is a story I never thought I'd read. There's a new cassette coming out by Toshiba.
Yeah, let's celebrate because, man, high quality new cassette done.
So this is
high resolution audio.
A cassette tape?
Yeah, it's a cassette tape, but remember, all the tapes at the moment are really bad quality because they've only got one factory. They're only doing this. Well, Toshiba are actually investing in making high-resolution audio cassettes. Now, these are pretty cool because we all used cassettes in England in our old systems to kind of load stuff. A lot of other countries could afford discs.
Oh, on computers, you mean? Yeah.
Yes. So, this is really relevant for kind of computer gamers. But also, there's this whole cassette revival at the moment, isn't there? Like, we were talking about Sega Forever, actually. They sent out a cassette with kind of game soundtracks on it to YouTubers. So, these are really popular.
Well, I think cassettes are kind of... I never liked cassettes originally, if I'm honest. I used them because I had to. Like, when Minidisc came along, I got rid of my tape players and everything. But I was kind of, you're probably the same. We both love music, so I had like quite a high-end, cassette recorder, and I think like saved up for ages for it, and I was quite proud of my Walkman back in the day, I must admit. But it does seem bizarre that there is like this renewed interest, because we talked, didn't we, on the show a few months ago, that there is now a factory that's resumed making tape again because the world supply is running out. So there's a renewed interest in it. But
it's a lower quality tape. Like at the moment, a lot of this is coming out and it's lower quality. This is like high resolution. They've said basically Japan has a strong passion for technology and recognises audio standards. And it's like an authority on that. So it's kind of... if they're going to mass market produce these, they're going to really reach that high standard of tape quality that we used to get back in the days that are pretty expensive. Like if you look at metal tapes at the moment on eBay, my God, you can spend a fortune on those.
What's interesting is, though, there's a report here, What Hi-Fi have been talking about it, and they haven't really revealed exactly how it's going to work and whether or not it's going to be backwards compatible.
Okay.
Which... if it is, that'd be amazing. If you can kind of get like CD audio quality out of your old like 30-year-old like Walkman or your mum's ghetto blaster, that'd be pretty amazing. But I do wonder why, though.
Read your games 10 times quicker.
Yeah, but for computers, that'd be quite cool. If you can... So I did this the other day. I was quite bored on Sunday. Samantha had gone out. I'd finished work, got home, and I thought, I've not played my Commodore 16 for a while. I thought, I set it up. There is a version of Paperboy. And I hadn't played that for years. It wasn't ever the best version of it, but it was pretty much a technical marvel. And I thought, I'll give that a go. I must not have played it for 20 years. Put the tape in. It loaded and the graphics were all corrupted. And I was like, okay, turned the other side over, didn't load at all. Looked, there's a bit of like mould in the case and stuff. And then I thought, this is a 30-year-old game. I'm actually more amazed that any do work anymore, to be fair. So having something like this for the computer community, if you want to keep it real, keep it old school, you don't need to use like SD cards and all that. There is value for us, I think. But I wonder who in the audio community is interested enough for them to actually warrant producing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, because when we first heard about this kind of cassette revolution coming back, it was regarding prisoners, and that prisoners were the only people getting cassettes printed because you couldn't use them as a weapon or anything like that, and so they were still making them for just prisons, and then now they've started to go to the hipsters, and then it's going to the console people again, and now it's going to the audio high-end people, so it's really odd, isn't it?
But I actually do quite like these kind of weird audio formats. There's a guy on YouTube called Modern Classic. I don't know if you've seen him before. And he actually did a video the other day, actually, Super Audio CD, Is It Worth It in 2018? And this was a format that was essentially trying to do surround sound with CD and everything, but it was massive failure. But audiophiles actually really like it.
Okay.
And there are, you look at Techmoan on YouTube, he covers all these kind of weird formats that never took off. So I am interested in that, but I do wonder, getting a new one in 2018, I'm quite intrigued as to what their thinking is behind that.
Yeah, and how it sounds, because I always remember tape sounding crap, sorry to say it. That tape sounded nice, but tape, no.
Well, that's the thing. I'm nostalgic for a lot of stuff. I love vinyl. You're a vinyl head as well. We like music on vinyl, sounds great. The two things I don't really miss from back in the day is cassette tapes and videotapes.
Yeah.
Because even back then I thought the quality was dreadful. Yeah. So it's like, I've got no desire to sit down and watch Alien on VHS tape when I've got it on Blu-ray. It's like, there are some things that necessarily, progress has been a good thing, but, we never know. We might be impressed, so we'll keep an eye out for it. Now, of course, if you have got any stories you'd like us to talk about on the Retro Hour podcast, we are on Twitter, and we have been tweeting quite a bit this week.
Yeah, feel free to share us and let any of your friends know about the Retro Hour. The best thing is word of mouth. If you recommend something to someone, it's just going to be much better than kind of us saying it.
Yeah, or an advert or something.
Yeah.
We've had a few of that this week. Tweet Kevin the other day. Can anyone recommend a good 8-bit computer game podcast? Someone recommended us.
Yeah.
We've got a new listener.
And also check the back catalogue, because we get so many people saying, "Oh, I can't wait till you get John Romero on," or "I can't wait till you get this guy," and we're like, "He was on this episode, guys."
Yeah, there's loads of them on our website, and actually we might start feeding a few more out on Twitter if you ever miss any. So if you want to follow us on Twitter at Retro Hour UK, we're on Facebook, Instagram as well. All of those are on our website at theretrohour.com. So that's been this week's news, and now are you ready for the main event? Let's talk about classics like Epyx, California Games, Chips Challenge, the 3DO, the Lynx, Summer Games 2. Chuck Sommerville is this week's special guest. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast. I must admit, I've been excited all week for this week's special guest. Welcome to the show, Chuck Sommerville.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, we're going to get into some incredible stories, I'm sure, of games like California Games and Chips Challenge, your time at Epyx and EA. We always like to get a little bit of background on our guests, though, and kind of go, back to what influenced you in the first place. So it would be quite nice to find out, what was kind of your earliest memory of computers or video games? What did it kind of all start for you? What got you interested?
Well, back when I was in probably about 7th or 8th grade, and this would have been back in the mid-'70s, probably around 1975-ish or so, I was lucky enough to be in a program where they were experimenting, giving kids that had talented and gifted abilities, giving them some advanced training and things. So I was given access to the college, to the computer on the college campus in my hometown, and I immediately started writing games on it. And then after that, we started getting magazines, like Byte magazine, really old magazine. I was reading about the new homebrew computers that were coming out, and when I read about the Apple computer, the Apple II computer, I was really excited. And so my dad bought me one of those. Actually bought the board-only option, which was only available for like 1 month. They would sell just the circuit board. But my dad worked for IBM as a office products repairman, so he had access to things like power supplies and typewriter cases and things like that. So we built up our own version of the Apple II from that circuit board. And again, I went right into writing games on it in BASIC.
Do you think technology would have been a bigger part of your life if it wasn't for your father's influence then? Did he really influence your passion?
Oh, my father was definitely a big part of it. He was, before I went off to college, he was really, really supportive. And, being the sort of attention-seeking nerd that I am, whenever I was working on stuff, I would go to my father and say, "Look at this cool thing I did," and he was very supportive and saying, "Yes, that's really cool." And there were actually times when he would actually sit next to me while I was working and watch what I was doing, and I would discuss what I was doing with him. So yeah, he was a very important part of my early computer work.
Well, we don't really hear much in Europe about the Apple II scene, but quite a lot of stuff we hear is about kind of John Romero as well being involved in it, and I heard he was a big fan of Grubs in Space.
Well, actually, he's a bigger fan of Snakebite. So I guess he wrote the reviews for both Grubs in Space and Snakebite on Movie Games for me. Basically, John Romero is like a real retro Apple junkie. And he was a fan of my early work, particularly Snakebite. I found out later, after I got to know John, that he was one of the few people in the world that had finished all 29 levels of the game. The levels were designed to be asymptotically difficult as it progressed, and I didn't actually expect a human being to be able to finish it, but John Romero did. And he threw a party one year in Dallas, Texas, when he was starting his Ion Storm company. And he invited a bunch of the Apple II legends to all come to this party. And I went to that party, which is where I met him for the first time. And it was an amazing party because there were people there that were, heroes of mine from those days that I had never met in person. Of course, John was, excited because all of his heroes were there. But then again, he arranged the party.
But even like you as well, 'cause I mean, John Romero, he went on to be such a big name in gaming. And the fact that really he was probably looking up at you and idolizing you because you made these games.
Well, yeah, it was really funny, getting to know him, because it was like this mutual admiration society. Because I'm a huge I'm a huge fan of Doom and Quake, and I played a lot of that game. So, yeah, it's really great. And then, meeting John, getting to meet Brenda through him. When I met Brenda, her name at the time was Brenda Breathwaite. When I met her, I didn't really know who she was. But as I started looking into her history, I was, truly astonished at the depth of her talent. And the fact that the two got married was just amazing.
Well, I heard that Grubs in Space was even popular outside the gaming world. Is it true you got like coverage in a metal music magazine?
Yeah, well, I mean, different magazines review games, but yeah, Heavy Metal did review the game, and that that was pretty funny because I never had a game reviewed in a magazine other than a computer magazine, and so they did a review of it, and it was great. I felt like, okay, now I'm famous. Maybe I should try for Rich next.
And I heard you got a few letters from a prisoner that wanted to learn programming.
That's the other amusing thing. Apparently, some prisoner read the article, and he wrote me a letter and sent it to Epyx. I guess he had figured out that I was at Epyx at the time, or maybe it was when I was a Sirius. I don't remember for sure. But anyway, so I got this letter, and I read this letter. And he was excited about the game, and he wanted to learn how to make adventure games. And he said he had access. He had plenty of time since he was incarcerated, and he had access to a TRS-80. And I don't think I wrote back to him.
You know what it does prove, though, the fact that, you were in the Heavy Metal magazine, you were getting letters like that. It must have proved that gaming was crossing over into the mainstream at that point.
It certainly was, yes. The earliest write-up that I can recall of my work was when I was in college after Snakebite was released. I had gone back to my hometown. My hometown is in Huntington, West Virginia, and my sister arranged for one of the writers at the local newspaper to do a story about me. So I'm there at my parents' house, and the newspaper people come and they interview me about it, and there's a fun article somewhere about me in my video game. This is very, very early on. This is like 1982-ish, plus or minus a year. And I distinctly remember one question from that interview, and they said, "Do you think anything will ever stop video games?" And I said, "Only if they outlaw it."
Well, how did you move then from Sirius to Epyx? Like, what was the process? How did you find out about the job?
So, Sirius got into financial problems. They and I don't know all the details in it, but there was something about some deal through some other partner they had that went south, and they ended up holding the bag on like a lot of money and product that they couldn't move. So they became insolvent. So when they went down, the president of Sirius was Jerry Jewell. I spent 2 weeks trying to work for a different company in mainstream software, like writing software for a newspaper. But Jerry contacted me, said he had gotten a gig at Epyx, and wanted to know if I wanted to move along with him to go work at Epyx. And I think he was just contract project manager. But he was looking for programmers that he trusted because he had a project to convert summer games from the Commodore 64 to the Apple II. So I came on board Epyx to do that. Epyx hired me as a salaried employee to do that project. At the time, I was living in the Sacramento area, actually, a suburb of Sacramento called Rancho Cordova, which is where Sirius was located. So I was living there and working on this summer games project, And then when that finished off, Jerry and I tried to break away and do a little consulting studio, and that didn't go anywhere. So I ended up going back to Epyx and actually moving to the Bay Area. And I worked for Epyx for about 7 years until Epyx finally collapsed.
Well, what was the culture like at Epyx then when you first joined? Must have been quite an exciting place to be.
When I started, it was a lot smaller. There were probably only about 50 people there when I started, and we had had the shrink wrap machines and the production facilities, and we did some disc. We didn't do distribution there, but anyway, we had the shrink wrap line was there in the building. I think that building was in Sunnyvale. Then the company grew, and we eventually moved farther north on the peninsula towards Sacramento, towards San Francisco, and we moved to Redwood City into one of the buildings that was closer to the bay, one of the higher end commercial places. And at the height of Epyx, there were 150 people, and it was covered, a pretty large space. And so the atmosphere when I started Epyx was quite different than the atmosphere when I left. At the beginning, it was much more close knit, and we would have game parties and things. But toward the end, it was a much more sprawling, bigger company, and there were different divisions, and I was in the Lynx group, and I had a special card key to get into our area, and not everybody in the company was allowed into the area that I was in, and there was some jealousy over that. And then there was, I'm not saying it was bad. People still had a good time, and we would run around the office with our laser tag from World of Wonder, or we would shoot each other with the Nerf guns and things like that. There was plenty of lighthearted fun there, but I'm just saying it was a much different environment at the end than it was at the beginning.
Well, they were famous for producing the game series, and the thing about the game series is we found them really good value for money because you had about 4 or 5 games in one. Were they massively successful or popular?
Well, I couldn't really speak to the financial level of it. I know they were pretty popular. I can tell you this, that when we were working on those, and again, the very first product I worked for Epyx was a port of one of these games, Summer Games, to the Apple II. After that, I never did another Apple product. I worked on the Commodore almost exclusively, Commodore 64. But they tended to be a bit tedious from a development point of view, because the marketing department obviously knew they had a format that was working for them, so they would try to come up with the next excuse to come out with another game in the game series. And then it was up to us as engineering to try to find ways to find individual events that matched whatever theme they had picked, and try to come up with a fun little game that was kind of lighthearted and not too deep, but still fun to play. So I did quite a few of them, but I didn't have a lot of passion for them, because it was like, oh yeah, okay, so let me figure out how to make this luge game where you're sliding down a luge thing. How do I make that fun?
Well, I remember, for me as a kid, every kid at school had a copy of California Games. And, living in rainy England at the time, that seemed like really cool and like really exotic and stuff to us.
Bohemian,
Yeah, it did. It seemed like California surfer dudes and all that. But it was, how did you come up with the ideas of that? Were you actually playing those games yourself, or what was kind of the thinking behind California Games? So
California Games was kind of an exception to the rule for all these game series games. I think it was originally... the concept was originally envisioned by Matt Householder to do something that was based more on urban extreme sports. The thing is that there were people in our group that actually did some of these things. Some of us played around with hacky sacks. I was actually a skateboarder. I would actually ride a skateboard in skateboard parks, and drop down into the bowls and carve and all that stuff. So I actually knew about skateboarding, which is why I ended up writing the half pipe game for the California Games. It was a bit more, at our heart, it's stuff that was more personal to us when we did it. I think it showed in the game. The guy who wrote the surfing event, John Loop, actually was from Hawaii, so surfing, was very important to him. So he really understood how to make that game great.
And it's kind of like all the games that weren't in the Olympics,
Yes.
the left out ones. Yeah. Was it hard to get like the kind of balance? Like, are we going to go for really high end graphics, or are we going to go for gameplay? And to get that mix perfect.
Well, back at that time when you're writing for the Commodore 64, you basically would push the graphics as far as the platform would let you. Much different way of writing games than today, writing games, say, in Unity on the PC, because the hardware just wasn't capable. And it wasn't just CPU power. It's that you can't just draw it with a triangle engine. You can't just, draw where the guy is on the wave or where he is on the half pipe. You have these things called sprites, which are kind of like a mouse cursor, and you only have like 8 of them, and you can move them around the screen, and they're independent of the background, and you have to figure out how to optimize it so that you can do something interesting with very limited graphics.
Well, let's talk about one of my personal favourite systems, and I think a very underrated machine. I love the Atari Lynx, especially that first model.
Well, it was the Lynx then.
Yeah, right there, at that point. When did you first see the Lynx then? Do you remember hearing about it and what the kind of original designs and plans were for it?
Well, as you probably know, I was on the development team for the hardware. As far as I know, there was some deal that was negotiated at upper level management to develop this hardware, because the Lynx was developed there. That's why I was in the Lynx division, in the section that nobody could go in except us. And as part of that negotiation, they brought on board R.J. Michael and Dave Needle, who were principal engineers behind the Amiga. So we knew that it was going to be something amazing right off the bat, because the Amiga was, I think, the first desktop computer that had hardware graphics engine built into it. So, that team, of course, wanted to build a handheld gaming system that had hardware graphic assist. So the Lynx, it had not a triangle engine. It actually had, it would draw rectangles. So it had a hardware sprite engine, but it could distort them a little bit. It could change the scale every time it drew the line. So you could get, things that were like wider at the top and narrower at the bottom and things like that. But it was a different piece of hardware than what people had normally seen in the gaming industry.
Well, I remember, seeing the Game Boy at first, and all the kids at school going wild about the Game Boy, and before that the Tiger Electronics things. I mean, even the fact that it had a beautiful colour display. I mean, it really did feel like the Lynx was like a next generation. Were the goals of that to make it quite a high-end system then and quite powerful?
Yeah, it was supposed to be powerful, and it was supposed to blow everybody away. And I think at the time, the people who knew about it were, really quite impressed. But Epyx ran into some financial problems. I think funding for the project ran out, and they had to seek funding elsewhere. And I think that's when the project eventually got being sold off to Atari. And I personally believe that Atari didn't, they didn't invent it. They bought it. So I don't think they had as much invested in it, emotionally or culturally. So I don't think they promoted it as high as they did as much as they did their other machines, like the Jaguar or some of the other machines. So I think it could have been more successful if Atari had supported it more.
That must have been quite heartbreaking in a way to see how much, resources and work you guys put into it, and then watching Atari kind of mismanage it like that. That must have been pretty upsetting.
Yes, it was. But, by that time, the company had basically crashed, and all the great talent had kind of spread to the four winds, and, the Electronic Arts and the Brodermans of the world had snapped up all that talent.
Well, how did Chip's Challenge come about then?
So Chip's Challenge was one of the launch titles, and I had originally been working on a kind of a first-person tank game that I think it was mostly inspired by Return Fire, which was a 3DO game. I think I have that history right. Anyway, so I've been wanting to do something that was, like a tank wandering around between walls and things, but I really couldn't get the math working on it correctly, and that project was canceled. And we still had about 10 weeks before we had to have all the software finished before, they went into production of the cartridges. And I didn't have anything to do, but I was in the Lynx division, and I had wanted to do, I had this idea for this map-based puzzle game. So I pitched the idea, and the management kind of shrugged and said, okay, if you think you can do it in 10 weeks, we want to get as many titles as we can. So for me, this was a great opportunity because for so many years at Epyx, it had been, working on games for the game series or, something that somebody else had come up with. And so this was something of my own design, and I really dug in hard. And I was really lucky at the time because a lot of the other titles were finishing up. And the testers that we had, because we had a whole room full of testers for the Lynx, they were becoming free too because the other games were finishing up. So I had, a bunch of programmers that were, kind of game designers. And I had a bunch of testers. I had an army of people behind me. So we finished the thing in 10 weeks, start to finish. The Chips Challenge was done. So it was, amazingly difficult schedule. But it was probably, I would say, the largest team that I had worked on to date. Because before then, it had just been, one or two people working together on a project.
How did the Microsoft version come around?
One of the guys that worked at Epyx early on, or actually he was there even until the end of the day, is a guy named Tony Garcia. And Tony Garcia was a friend of mine all the way back to the Serious Software days. He had worked in production at Serious Software. And I had recruited him into Epyx, and he was working in the marketing department at Epyx. He moved there because he started as a tester, and then he moved into marketing. But when he left Epyx at some point, and he went to go work at Microsoft in their newly minted game division. And the story I recall from Tony is that they were looking for products, and he liked Chips Challenge, and he talked them into doing a port of it to go into their Windows Entertainment Pack. And that's the version that most people know of Chips Challenge. And I didn't know that this was even happening until they were done with it. So when they were finished, they showed me the IBM version. They called it the IBM version at the time, the PC version. And I was a bit disappointed because it didn't have the smooth scrolling that the original Lynx version did. The guy jumped from place to place. But I think that was probably a matter that the PC probably didn't have the computing power at the time to do scrolling animation like that.
Well, we've heard that from quite a few guests, actually, that Microsoft have taken their products and put them in entertainment packs without permission. Did you make much money out of Chips Challenge?
I made no money out of Chips Challenge. In contrast, I made a lot of money off of California Games, but at the time I was writing California Games, I was on a royalty compensation project, agreement. And in fact, California Games made so much money that our management department said, "No, programmers aren't allowed to make that much money. There's something wrong if programmers are making that much money." So they offered me to change my contract at that point to something where I got stock options, and they raised my salary a bit. And so when I wrote Chips Challenge, I actually was not under royalty, and I was just a salaried employee. And sadly enough, I'd like to point this out. I probably shouldn't. My partner Barn probably would. Is that when I did Chips Challenge 2, which I wrote after I left the game industry, I had hoped to make some money off of that. And when we finally got it published through my partner Barn, who lives in London, Barn Cleve, we did Chuck's Challenge, which is a whole interesting story on its own. And then we finally released Chips Challenge 2. I still have not received any money yet from any game related to Chips Challenge, even though I have the right to get that money because all the money that we've made on it has gone back into paying for the development of it. And since I have a full-time job that's not gaming, most of the work for those games, or a lot of the work for those games, has been done by an independent game development studio. So we've had to spend the money that we've made on the game paying for the development of it.
Well, Chips Challenge 2 did finally come out in, was it 2015? What was,
yes.
I remember reading about that game, like it was kind of up there with like Duke Nukem Forever, the fact that people thought it was never going to see the light of day. What was the story with that delay, and why did it take so long to finally come out?
It was mostly legal issues. So, first of all, I couldn't actually write the game until I left the game industry, because I worked for. After I worked for Epyx, I worked for Electronic Arts and 3DO, but I can't write a game that was owned by Epyx if I'm working for Electronic Arts. So when I left the game industry back in the mid-'90s, or early to mid-'90s, was when I wrote Chips Challenge 2, because I'd been getting emails from fans asking for a sequel. I spent 2 years writing it, but before I started writing it, I contacted the company who owned the rights, company called Bridgestone Multimedia, and I said, I want to do this project, and do I have your support? And they said yes, and that was kind of the end of it. So I wrote this game, and at the end, when I finished it, I said, okay, I'm done. And they said, right, okay, so we want $300,000, and we want guaranteed sales figures of some amount every quarter, and you can go ahead and publish it. And they're not even a publisher, or they're not even going to publish it, right? They just want a lot of money because they own the name. And I'm just a guy living in a suburb in California. I don't have $300,000. There's no way, so it just wasn't going to happen. I was really upset about that for a couple years. I couldn't sell the game under the name Chips Challenge because I didn't own the name, and, I don't own the rights to it. So years went by, and every few years somebody would contact me and say, we'd like to put Chips Challenge on the iPhone or something like that. And I'd say, yeah, sounds like a good idea. So contact this company, Bridgestone Multimedia, and if you can get us the rights to do that and sell it, then we'll move forward. And they all usually shut up at that point. Because the thing with Bridgestone is Bridgestone isn't a video game company. They own the title because they bought it kind of in a fire sale. They actually specialize in making religious videos. So they didn't understand the game industry. They didn't know what they had. They didn't realize that it wasn't worth millions and millions of dollars. And so they were just being outrageous about it. At one point, this guy, Barn Cleve, from New York, from London, contacted me and said he wanted to convert it to the iPhone. And I'm like, great, this is like anybody else that's asked me this question. He said he had venture capital. This was a new twist. So I said, great, contact Bridgestone. And he did, and he came back and says, yes, I see the problem here. But he's a bit more creative problem solver than most people. He said, okay, let's do this. Let's release a game that's like Chips Challenge, but we won't call it Chips Challenge. We'll say it's from the designer of Chips Challenge, and we can put that in the description legally. And then when people do a search on the app for Chips Challenge, they'll find the name in it, and they'll say, well, it's from the same guy. Maybe we'll buy this. And that was how Chuck's Challenge was born. And that was not, I did not come up with that name. That Barn came up with that. And I said, okay, we'll do that. So that's how Chuck's Challenge was born. And that's why it took so long. At that point, we started negotiation again with Bridgestone for the rights to release Chips Challenge 2. It was already done. And once a year, Barn would contact them and try to negotiate them again. And then around the 25th anniversary of Chips Challenge, he said, look, it's been 25 years. You have this title. You're not doing anything with it. I don't think anybody wants to wait around until, the 50 year, to do something with this. So it's either now or never, guys. So they finally agreed to give us a license agreement on the name with a very generous compensation package to Bridgestone. And I won't say how much that was. But it does have something to do with why we still haven't made any money off of it. but we got the rights to use the name. And that was when we finally got to release it. In fact, we're currently in the process of updating the version on Steam, where there was a recent patch to it. It allows people to share levels and level sets within the Steam platform. And that was just within the last month, went live.
Well, during the hiatus of Chips Challenge 2, the fan community kind of helped drive content. What stuff did they create?
Yeah, the fans are amazing. I just want to point out, and if it weren't for the fans and their support and their insaneness, I wouldn't have done this. I really appreciate them. So what had happened, and I guess one of the reasons that really drove me to write Chips Challenge 2 in the first place was the fans had reversed the reverse engineered the file format for the Microsoft version. And they had not only had reversed the file format, so they were writing their own level editors to create new content for the Microsoft version. Some of them were actually writing their own game engines that would run this content, because by this point you couldn't actually buy the game anymore, but new content was available. So they were like detectives sifting through the game logic to try to make it be, like cycle for cycle accurate from the original Microsoft version of the game logic. So they had written their own version of the game engine, so their own Chips Challenge clones that would load the content. And they continued as a community to generate not only new levels, but through some encouragement of mine and discussions I had with them, they started making official, quote unquote, level packs that were community endorsed. That this is level pack 2 and level pack 3, and last I heard they were up to level pack 4.
And I mean, for you, the fact that Chips Challenge 2 did finally get a proper release must have kind of been a bit like vindication that, after 23 years it was finally available.
It was actually a relief. I mean, obviously, as I said, when I couldn't release it, I was really sad for a couple years. I finally got over that. But one of the things that I had told my wife around that time was I basically showed her, where on my computer to find all the files for it. And I said, look, if I die, take these files and release them to the pirate community so that at least it gets out there and somebody will see it.
Luckily, it didn't take that in the end.
It didn't take that, but that's a true story. I actually did tell her that. An amazing thing was that, for like 20 years, this thing was vaporware that nobody knew about, or people knew existed, but nobody had seen it. But there were about 20 people out there who are active members of the Chips community who not only knew about it, but actually had copies of it because they were part of my alpha and beta test group, because I wasn't testing it on my own when I was developing it. Each one of them I had a signed contract with, and each one of them, their copy was personalized to have their name in it, so that if they actually did release it to the pirate network, I would know where it came from. And they knew that they were individually tagged. But I have to say, amazingly, nobody released it. It was, throughout that entire 20-year period, it was actually kept under wrap, even though it was out there in the wild.
Well, let's talk about another big project that you were involved with in the 90s. You joined a company that I remember reading about at the time. Everyone thought it was going to completely change video games forever. 3DO, you joined them when they were working on the M2. Is that when you got involved at that point?
Yes, I was brought on to the M2 team. And we were working on a race car game called IMSA Racing. And that was a lot of fun. I got to work with some really amazing people at 3DO, and I was there for a year and a half. And just about the time we finished up the racing game, they made the decision to can the project. And there was a lot of sadness at that point. And I remember talking with Bill Budge, that's an amazing name there. Sorry, I want to name drop there. Bill Budge. I was talking with Bill Budge about this, and he was really upset about it. And I gave him a different perspective that I think he appreciated. I said, the year and a half I was here, I got to work on really amazing bleeding edge technology. And I got to work with some of the most talented people in the industry, and I learned so much, and I really enjoyed my time here. And I'm not going to let the positive that I got out of this experience be spoiled by the fact that they canceled this project. I still am really glad I worked on it. Because
the M2 was the follow-up system to the 3DO, wasn't it? The original multiplayer.
Yes, it was. It was the processor was PowerPC based, and it had custom silicon triangle engine, much like the NVIDIA chips of today. So they had a team of silicon designers that were building these amazing triangle engines, and it did shading, so that you could get the depth cues, and it did proper perspective of the textures on the triangles. It did everything that you would expect out of a modern graphics GPU now.
And that was RJ Michael and Dave Needle again working on that.
Yes, again, I got to work with RJ Michael and Dave Needle. And this is something really interesting. When I went to go work for 3DO, their offices were in the same building that Epyx was in when I left, or when Epyx crashed. So there I was, going back to work in the same building I had worked in for years.
That must have been
but
surreal.
For a different company.
With the same people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
With many of the same people. It was really quite interesting.
So before the M2 project did get cancelled, what projects had you been working on, and what had been developed by that stage?
Well, the only one that I had worked on was, as I said, the IMSA racing game, which was a race car game where you're driving not formula race cars, but cars that looked a bit more like stock cars. They were IMSA, International Motorsports Association, or something like that. So they would have, we were working on tracks like, we had made a model of the Laguna Seca track, which is here in California. And, it's just this windy, curvy, up and down hills track, somewhere south of the Bay Area, I think. Anyway, it was amazing because we, as a team, development team, we actually went to the Laguna Seca racetrack. And we got to drive our street cars around on the track, and that was fun. and then we walked the whole track, and we were like taking pictures of textures and things that we were going to put into it, and so that was a lot of fun as a team to go to the actual racetrack and walk it.
Well, with those M2 chips, I mean, the hardware, I heard it did end up in like a couple of arcade machines, and I don't know if you know if this is true or not. I did read online that apparently it was used in a coffee machine eventually.
I have no idea.
Which sounds really bizarre.
Legends, though.
That is a really strange fate, though, isn't it, for the hardware?
I seriously doubt the validity of that, but I don't know. I remember that the development card that I had, which was kind of the unit on a card that plugged into a Macintosh, was like $18,000 a piece for those development boards. So I don't know.
Well, 3DO in general, I mean, like I said before, when they first came along, all the hype was that they were going to change the console landscape forever. How do you think they were overall in the console market? Do you think they made many mistakes? What kind of went wrong with 3DO?
All I can really say about 3DO was that their very first platform, the Opera platform, was an amazing device, and I have one, and I love playing it. And that was back when they were SMSG, I think, San Mateo Software Group. And early on, they were very, very down to earth, or they were very engineering oriented company. The wives of the heads of the company would make lunch and bring it in, and feed people around around the lunch table. So, and they carried that through. They had a cafeteria that you could eat for free. They were one of the first companies that I worked for. I mean, this is common now, like at Google. If you're a Google employee, you can go to their cafeteria and eat for free. But 3DO was the first company that I'd ever seen that did things like that.
Well, what are you up to nowadays? Because in our call earlier, you kind of showed us this giant LED ball that you were creating.
For Burning Man, yes. So when I left the game industry, because my partner Kevin Furry. Kevin Furry and I actually worked together on California Games. He was with me at Epyx. Kevin Furry and I, we got out of the game industry to make things out of LEDs. And we started out making LED signs, and we sold quite a few into the casino industry, like for jackpots and things like that. We ended up doing more and more custom work. We had done so many interesting things. Some of them were like art related, but it's all custom work for building things out of LEDs. We got the attention of Philips Lighting, and I think Philips at the time had the contract on the Times Square Ball in New York for New Year's Eve, and so we got a deal where we got to Philips wanted to replace all the lights, which were incandescent bulbs, with LEDs, but they really didn't have an engineering staff that could handle it. So they got us involved to do that. So we engineered the lights for the Times Square Ball, and we built all those lights. So so the very first time we built the ball, which was for the 2007-2008 year end, my signature was inside that ball. We got to autograph it, and I got to go to New York and see the ball drop that year. That was an amazing adventure. 2 years later, they came back to us. They said they want us to build the ball again at twice the diameter. So it went from 6 feet to 12 feet, and they changed it to be on display every day instead of just on New Year's Eve. And I'm still building things out of LEDs professionally. I built a lot of art pieces.
Well, that kind of, it seems to be a bit of a theme throughout your career that you've always kind of pushed technical limitations and always looked for the next big thing. So it's been incredible to get these stories off you, Chuck. I mean, have you got any interest in the gaming industry at the moment then, or is there anything to maybe revisit there at some point? Any remakes of your classics?
No, I'll continue to work with the Chips Challenge community, and we'll continue to make some improvements to the stuff we have out there, be it Chuck's Challenge or Chips Challenge. And then if I find the time, I'm pretty busy with the LED stuff. If I find the time, I may work on another project in that same genre in the Chips Challenge. Well, it basically in the real time puzzle solving genre, but that I don't plan to go back into the industry. I've joked about it, but it's not really what it once was. I don't think I would really like it as well.
Well, I think the thing with the way that indie gaming works today, you can kind of just dip your toe in and not commit to it 100% full time now, can't you, though? Yeah,
but you need a day job if you're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories. Honestly, we could talk to you all night, but, we appreciate it's a weekend and we don't want to take up all of your day. But thank you so much for sharing your stories with us this week.
You're certainly welcome. It was good to talk to you.